I'm glad to be with you in your home from my home. Over the last 5 or 6 weeks, I've had the privilege of speaking to many of the pastors of the Canadian Baptist of Ontario and Quebec. Some have amazed me by what they said. Their churches are doing better, and they are stronger than they were 6 weeks ago. How can that be, you may wonder, given that their church buildings are closed? Well, I think that this sermon will reveal something about why they are flourishing. But first, let me ask you this. What burdens are you carrying? It is said that in 1863, when the emancipation of the slaves of South Carolina was proclaimed, that a group of former slaves gathered together on an island in a large field to wait for the government agent to come. Along with the proclamation, he was also bringing the deed to a 40-acre parcel of land along with a mule. The mood was one of jubilation because it was going to be a wonderful day. But the mood changed when they saw the boat come along the river, turning a bend, and they saw in the face of the government agent great sadness. Upon seeing that, one could hear a large groan going through the crowd. And at that moment, an old lady who was sitting down stood up and
she sang, "Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows but Jesus. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Glory, hallelujah." And then she spoke, looking to the people around her. She said, "Sometimes I'm up, sometimes I'm down. Oh, yes, Lord. Sometimes I'm almost level to the ground. Oh, yes, Lord. Oh, nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows but Jesus. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Glory, hallelujah." She looked at the people standing by. She said, "Although you see me going along so," and they answered, "Oh, yes, Lord, I've got my trials here below." And they answered, "Oh, yes, Lord. Oh, nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows but Jesus. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Glory, hallelujah.
troubles. Do you have any of these? Indeed. What is life without trouble? It would be nice, but they are there. The question is, though, what do we do with our troubles? If you're anything like me, we allow our troubles to become burdens. And as you know, burdens become heavy. And as they weigh us down, then we do what we like to do so often. We grumble. Take the nation of Israel, for example. They'd been released from Egypt from centuries of slavery. They had been making bricks for the pharaohs and the aristocrats of the land, but now they had been released from that work. They were traveling towards the promised land. Life was good, wasn't it? We read in the book of Numbers in chapter 11 rather, beginning to read at verse 4, these words which tell us the story of the people of Israel. You'd think they'd be joyful, that it would be wonderful to have been freed from slavery, but no. Numbers 11:4 says, the rabble with them began to crave other food because they'd been eating manna now for a while. And again the Israelites started wailing, and said, if only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost. Also the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the garlic. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything except that manna. Now the manna was like coriander seed and looked like resin. The people went around gathering it and then ground it in a hand mill or crushed it in a mortar. They cooked it in a pot or made it into loaves. And it tasted like something made with olive oil. Every night when the dew settled on the camp, the manna also came down. What kinds of things trouble you? Where do your burdens come from? Most likely, like the Israelites, your burden comes from asking a 3-letter word, which is why. This why is composed of a mixture of the past, of unfulfilled aspirations, of broken dreams and promises, and circumstances that we find ourselves in, like this COVID-19, for example. Have those troubles ever woken you up in the middle of the night? Where you've asked yourself, why? Why is life so tough? Why does it have to be this way? Why do I have to suffer? Have you ever looked around other people and you feel pain inside and you look at them and they seem to be so happy? You have troubles with staying by yourself during this physical distancing and they seem to take it in stride. Then you ask yourself, why? Why do I have such a hard time with this? Or perhaps you've lost your employment, or your retirement savings have gone way down the drain because of the way that the stock market has been going. And then you ask yourself, why did this happen to me? What am I going to do? What will become of me, my family, my friends? And our thoughts just make a circle. They go around and around and around in our minds. Why is life so unfair? No wonder these troubles, these burdens become heavy. The people of Israel had been roaming in the wilderness for some time now. And as I mentioned, all they had to eat was this white thing that came from the ground every morning that was called manna. They began to dream of past meals. If only they had meat to eat like when they were in Egypt. Why had God taken them out of Egypt anyway? Was it to put them on a diet? This was so unfair. And so they grumbled. They grumbled to each other, they grumbled to Moses, and they grumbled to God. Why are you doing this? We're hungry for something else. We're tired of the same old. We want something new, something exciting. Enough of this. I think we say that about physical distancing and being stuck in our homes also. We want something different. So we carry this burden, or another burden that we might be carrying. Perhaps it's a broken, hurtful past, a deep regret. Perhaps it's your age and the frustrations of everything that comes with it, like loss of mobility, loss of hearing, loss of sight. Maybe your burden is related to a health issue, arthritis, depression, heart problems. Maybe it's the difficulties of this physical distancing. Maybe it's the issue of not having businesses to go to or your place of work. When those burdens become heavy, yes, we do grumble. Sometimes outwardly, to our friends, to our family, and sometimes inwardly, even to God. For Moses, the burden was being the leader of this nation of Israel. We read in Numbers 11, beginning to read at the beginning of verse 10. Moses heard the people of every family wailing at the entrance of their tent. The Lord became exceedingly angry, and Moses was troubled. He asked the Lord, "Why have you brought this trouble on your servant? What have I done to displease you that puts the burden on all these people on me? Did I conceive these people? Did I give them birth? Why do you tell me to carry them in my arms as a nurse carries an infant to the land you promised on oath to their ancestors? Where can I get meat for these people? They keep wailing at me, 'Give us meat to eat.' I cannot carry all these people. If this is how you're going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me right now. If I found favor in your eyes, do not let me face my own ruin with these people." Yes, Moses' burden was so heavy that he even began to question his own existence. You ever done that? Ever wondered why you're living? Ever wondered, why are these things happening to me? What did I do to deserve them? I recall years ago having a discussion with a family that had gone through a very traumatic experience. What amazed me was how serene they were about the whole thing, even though the pain was very evident in them. I've forgotten their names now, but I've not forgotten what they said that day when I visited with them. They said many people would say, "Why me? Why has this happened to me?" But we don't say that. We don't need to say that. Rather, we say, "Why not me?" Because after all, we know that God is with us. We know we're not alone in this. So why not us? These words have not left me. And as I reflected on them, as I continue to reflect on them, they make sense. Because since I've heard those words, any times that I have troubles coming my way and I feel burdened and I begin to grumble and I'm about to say, why me? I remember what they said. And I turn it around and I say, why not me? I mean, after all, I know that God continues to be with me. I know that God will carry me through this time. I know that God will provide with what I need in order to go through this. I mean, what's so special and unique that no problems, no hardship should come my way? I'm not that kind of unique person. Now, mind you, I don't go looking for problems because they seem to find me without me looking for them, I can tell you that. But why not me? Just think. Even Jesus himself experienced difficult circumstances. He went through a very difficult time on the days leading to Good Friday. but he stuck with it. That's what faith is all about. Faith is a deep-seated understanding that we are not alone, that the burdens that may be weighing us down are not all ours to carry, that God is with us and he will carry this load along with us. Faith is not so much something that keeps us as people without problems or burdens. Faith tells us that there is someone, namely God himself, that is there to carry those burdens. You know, God is not vindictive. God is not sending troubles our way just because it gives him a good laugh. No. Troubles come because troubles exist. Period. Now, I suggest that most of us, and I include myself here, carry those burdens, and we allow them to weigh us down because we forget that God is with us. When we forget that God is with us, what happens is that so often we feel like we're the victim. We're the victim of our circumstances, or we're the victim of what somebody else has done. The people of Israel complained and they grumbled because they felt they were victimized by their lack of meat. They blamed God for not providing properly for them. They were angry at their circumstances. I mean, was it their fault that they were in a desert? What had they done only to have manna all the time? But you know, the more they complained, the angrier they got. And the angrier they got, the more they felt like victims. It's a vicious circle, really. Moses' burden was made that much more because he felt he was the victim of these people that he couldn't control. Why had God put him in that situation? He was very happy looking after sheep. Way back then, the sheep of his father-in-law, Jethro. And so he even blamed God. So what can we do when we feel that we are the victim of our circumstances? What can we do when we feel the heaviness of what people have done to us? Now, we have to remember that we have no control over circumstances. We have no control over other people. What happens, happens. People do the things they do because they do. But we do have control over something. Not over our circumstances or other people, but we have control over how we react to them. And that's where faith comes in. Faith is important because it reminds us that God can be trusted, that he is with us, even when we don't feel that he's near us. Certainly our desires to be comfortable and to be without pain, to be without trials. But you and I know that life is not like that. Troubles do find us. So we have a choice. We have a choice to let those troubles become burdens, and those burdens to weigh us down, and for us to grumble, and for us to feel victims. Or we can decide to allow God to come in and carry those burdens along with us and guide us through these difficult times. Well, you may say, I don't see God. I don't see how he can carry those burdens. How does he does that? How does he do that, rather? Well, you know, God likes to use other people to come into our lives and to be his agents. God also, through his Spirit, reminds us that we're not alone. Paul learned this important truth, that God is with us no matter what. He wrote in his letter to the Philippians these words. He said, chapter 4, beginning to read at verse 10, he said, I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I have learned to be content. I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through Him who gives me strength. Now, Paul wrote this when he was in prison. So he knew really what it was to be hungry. He really knew what it was to be in difficult circumstances, in a cold cell, probably sleeping on a hard mat on the floor. And who knows what the food was like. But he rejoiced. He rejoiced because he knew that God was with him, and he also was remembered by the people who cared for him through a letter, I presume. Now, having this inner conversation with ourselves to remind ourselves that God is with us, it's not an easy thing. Simple, but it's not easy because we have to convince ourselves. We have to intentionally tell ourselves that we will be okay because God is alongside of us. God knows where we're at. He sees the troubles that we have. And He's not cold to those troubles. That's why He wants to remind us. And He wants us to remind ourselves that He is with us. And as I mentioned, one of God's favorite ways to help us out is to send people our way. To let us know that we're not alone, that there's another human being that knows where we're at. You know, these days, we all know what it feels like to keep our distance physically. We all know what it's like to be stuck at home, day in and day out, not being able to enjoy what we once have enjoyed, not to be able to be with our group of friends, and even to be with our brothers and sisters in the faith. We all know what it's like. So, we can share with one another what's going on inside, with the assurance that the other person knows exactly where we're at, because they are feeling it too. And perhaps when I'm telling somebody else, I'm having a real hard time to be stuck in my four walls, I'm really down in the deeps, maybe that other person will encourage us by telling us how they cope with it. That's a gift from God. We also find ways how to cope, or we're told that we're given wisdom from experts on the radio, on television, through the newspapers or magazines. We are told, we're given hints of how we can cope with this distancing. That too is a gift from God. He's telling us you're not alone in this. When Israel cried for meat, God provided it. When Moses said, I'm at my wit's end, I don't know what to do with these people, God provided for him. I believe that in the end, if Israel and if Moses had turned their questions of why me, if that they had turned it to a question that begins with how, things would have been different. Indeed, they would have done well to ask, how can we make our situation better? How can we persevere and be patient? How can we see our circumstances in a different way? How can we support one another through this ordeal of manna? What's your best recipe for manna? But they were stuck with the why. You know, it takes courage and perseverance to approach God with our burdens, because so often we don't feel He's there. But trust me, God is trustworthy. He can and does make our burdens lighter and more bearable. And so I encourage you to speak to Him, to tell Him what's on your heart, to tell Him what is troubling you. I encourage you to share those troubles with someone else too, so that God can use that other person to help you through. You know, at the beginning of this message, I mentioned something about those pastors who were amazed that their churches are doing better and they're stronger than they were even before this physical distancing started. Part of the reason that they're doing better and that they're stronger is because they didn't ask, why me? They didn't ask, why is this happening? Rather, they turned that and said, how can we best make use of this time that God has given to us? How can we use these circumstances and turn them around for God's glory? And as they explored the answer to those questions, that's when they discovered that God is still at work. And indeed, the church is alive and well, because God is alive and well. And so it is my prayer that we be brave and that we may seek God's help at every moment of our lives. It is my prayer that we would not shy away from telling God what troubles us and allow Him to answer us in whichever way He sees best. And we can trust that He will answer us. Let us pray. Eternal God, in those moments of our lives when we find ourselves facing great troubles, help us to remember that You are beside us. Remind us of Paul's experience while he was in prison, that because of Your presence, we can do all things, because truly You live in us. Oh God, may You increase our faith, so that at all times we would live our lives knowing that You are beside us, that You surround us, that You lift us up, and that You carry us. Amen.